Hello everyone, and welcome to my summary of The Abolition of Man by C.S. Lewis. I read this book on a whim because it was recommended to me by a good friend. He didn't tell me what the book was about, but he said it felt prophetic to him in the modern day. I was intrigued, so I picked up a copy. Based on the name of the book, I figured it would be about society feminizing men or something like that. But I was very wrong. It really describes a dystopian future that appears to be coming true as I'm making this video. The book is shocking and seemingly unbelievable in its outcomes, and yet it feels so real. Many of the things C.S. Lewis warns against in the book have come true today, and after this video, I think you will agree. So let's get into it. Throughout the book, C.S. Lewis stresses a very important point about natural law and moral subjectivism. That point is that subjectivity and objectivity matter, and objectivity is objectively better than subjectivity. If you don't know what objectivity and subjectivity are, then let's look at the example in the book. Say you and your friend are looking at a waterfall. It's beautiful and majestic. Maybe there's a deer drinking from the water beneath, and the sun is just rising over the hills. The rays of the sun cause a slight rainbow in the mist of the morning. The air is crisp and everything feels just right. The point is, it's beautiful. Now let's say, for example, you say to yourself, "This waterfall is sublime." Your friend glances over at you and says, "Hey, that's nice that it makes you feel that way, but in actuality, the waterfall is not sublime. It merely makes you feel that way, and you are projecting your feelings on the waterfall. The waterfall is not in and of itself sublime." You keep your eyes fixed on the waterfall and say, "Actually, I believe the waterfall is truly and inherently sublime, whether I am here to observe it or not. It is sublime regardless of my ability to perceive it. Its very nature is sublime, and my saying it is only a reflection of its innate quality." Do you see the difference? You say the waterfall is objectively sublime, while your friend says it's only a subjective view that you have of the waterfall. For the one who holds to subjectivity, they would say your feelings about an object are just projected onto it, while the one who holds to objectivity would say that the object itself is the source of its quality. This idea of objectivity and subjectivity apply to much more than any silly waterfall. It applies to everything, including truth. You may say to yourself, why does it matter whether or not truth is subjective or objective? Well, sit back and relax, because C.S. Lewis thinks it's extremely important. Humanity itself rests upon it, and he's going to explain why. The reason why this waterfall analogy is being used is because C.S. Lewis is criticizing a textbook he calls the Green Book. The Green Book is a real textbook, but Lewis chose not to use its real title to protect the authors from malignment. In the Green Book, a similar waterfall example is used, and the author of the textbook criticizes the one who says the waterfall is sublime by saying exactly what your friend said. That is, the waterfall is not sublime. It only makes you feel sublime. Now, C.S. Lewis takes this way of thinking and applies it to something much more important than a mere waterfall. Because if you think about it, if you think this way, then all value claims are worthless, which is clearly not true. C.S. Lewis even points to hypocrisy in the authors of the Green Book, who say that all things are subjective, and yet hold to certain things like improved student learning to be a good thing. For someone to be consistent in holding that all things are subjective, they'd have to say that the Holocaust was not objectively bad, or that rape is not objectively bad. It only makes them feel bad, and is only bad in their minds. There is nothing in the universe or any transcendent spiritual force that thinks it's bad as well. Another funny little thing happens when you argue that all things are subjective. Just listen to the claim itself. All things are subjective. Did you catch it? The very claim that all things are subjective is itself an objective truth claim. So what is the point of what Lewis is trying to say here? Well, let's say you teach this subjectivity to children, which was the purpose of the Green Book. Teaching children that all things are subjective actually saps them of their ability to respond rightly to experiences in both literature and the real world. Imagine telling a child that their emotional reaction to riding a roller coaster or enjoying a Twinkie is actually irrational and illogical. That child will be stunted in their moral motivation and their ability to show their emotions in their daily life. That child would start to question every emotional response they have to stimulus. Let's say that that child hears music and has the desire to dance. Well, they may just second guess their feelings and say, "Man, I want to, but it's just an illogical feeling I'm having, so I better not." Now let's say that that child grows up and sees atrocities in the world and thinks about how horrible they are, but then remembers that their feelings imply nothing about the nature of those actions or reality itself. They would be much less inclined to act upon their feelings and may just allow the evil deeds to continue rather than allowing their emotions to motivating them to end the evil in the world. To put this into perspective, C.S. Lewis is writing this in 1943. World War II is currently happening, and he may be seeing people suppressing their emotional responses to the war. An outsider's perspective would probably say that the people were being cowards for not wanting to fight the Nazis, but Lewis thinks the problem is actually much deeper. He believes that the educational system that teaches subjectivity has sapped people's moral motivation. Like I said earlier, this subjectivity applies to much more than just waterfalls. What if we taught our kids that true virtues are actually not truly good at all, and that true evils are actually not evil? All is just a subjective view that we can decide for ourselves or have society decide for us. Therefore, things like bravery and honor are nothing, and they shouldn't even be desired. This is a ridiculous thing to do in Lewis's eyes. The goal of education for Lewis is to train children in what he calls ordinate affections. To train them in this way would be to train them to love good and shun evil. Lewis believes in true good and evil, and we will get to that soon. But for now, just understand that children that lack the ability to know what good and evil are no true humans at all. Lewis says that this ability is a specifically human element, and that all true humans have it, and it unites all of humanity. Anyone who lacks this ability is a man without a chest. Now, as we mentioned earlier with the Green Book's authors, they may say that they don't believe in true virtue or objective truth, but when you boil down their thoughts, they actually do. They want bravery, they want virtue, but what they teach is actually stripping people of the very qualities they want, and they might not even know they're doing it. Lewis puts it like this: "And all the time, such is the tragicomedy of the situation, we continue to clamor for those very qualities we are rendering impossible. You can hardly open a periodical without coming across the statement that what our civilization needs is more drive or dynamism or self-sacrifice or creativity. In a sort of ghastly simplicity, we remove the organ and demand the function. We make men without chests and expect them virtue and enterprise. We laugh at honor and are shocked to find traitors in our midst. We castrate and bid the geldings be fruitful." Do you see what he's saying here? Teachers are stripping children of these innate and objectively good qualities without even knowing it, and then are shocked when the next generation is behaving the way they do. So now that this is out of the way, how does Lewis actually defend the idea that objective truth exists? Well, C.S. Lewis draws on many arguments for natural law and objective value. In his other work, Mere Christianity, he points to the supernatural origin of these values found in Christianity to support his argument. He ultimately says that God has established these things, but in many more words and in a much more eloquent way. Maybe I'll save that for another video. In The Abolition of Man, however, he does not appeal to God for his proof of these objective values. Rather, he points to values that are shared by virtually every culture with minor differences. He calls these values traditional moralities, and these values are shared by cultures in the East and the West by pagans, Christians, and Jews alike. Throughout the book, he refers to these traditional moralities as the Tao, which means the way or the path. This Tao is the basis of all value claims and judgments. Every society has them, and they are all virtually the same in the eyes of Lewis. He then claims that what the authors of the Green Book and anyone else who wishes to do away with the natural law and value claims is actually attempting to borrow part of the Tao to debase another part of the Tao. This is illogical in the eyes of Lewis. Anyone who attempts to remove the Tao must by default use part of the Tao to do it. By removing objective truth claims, you also must remove all of the virtues that you wish to see in society. You cannot have part of the Tao without the rest of it. By removing one piece, the rest crumbles. This is what Lewis saw happening in his day and what we see happening now. Lewis gives a dystopian future for a society that continues down this path, but we will talk about that soon. First, we have to establish some things about the Tao. The Tao is virtually every moral truth and way of life of every society that has ever existed. Different societies have slightly different paths, but that is only because the perfect way of life was still being figured out as societies grew and expanded. For example, Lewis points to many famous philosophers and teachers of the past who innovated the Tao in their society. Socrates, Aristotle, Moses, Confucius, and ultimately Jesus. Lewis, being a Christian, believed Jesus gave the perfect Tao to be followed, but pointed to members of every culture that also innovated the Tao in their time. His main goal is to show that the Tao is universal and can slightly change, but does not ever go away. It's immutable in humanity and is itself what makes us human. People may adapt and expand the Tao to be a more complete or perfect form, but he completely rejects those who want to do away with the Tao. Lewis says of those who innovate the Tao are like those who say, "You like your vegetables moderately fresh. Why not grow your own and have them perfectly fresh?" And those who wish to throw away the Tao as someone who says, "Throw away that loaf and try eating bricks and centipedes instead." He actually uses Nietzsche as his prime example of someone who tried to do away with the Tao and establish his own way. I'm sorry to any Nietzsche fanboys in the audience, but Lewis did not appreciate what he tried to do. So, how does Lewis turn this book into a dystopian future? It's actually quite simple, and yet profound. Take everything I just said about the subjective world and apply it to the future. What would happen if everything was merely subjective? Before we look at the end result of this type of world, we first have to establish something. Everyone knows that governments exist. A small group of people that reside over a large group of people. So, now I want you to imagine for a moment, totally hypothetically of course, that there's a small group of individuals who rule the entire world. Again, totally hypothetical. There definitely isn't a secret organization that wants to own you and your children and everything you have. They definitely don't want to control what you think.
Sharing of biased and
false news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media
Or brainwash you of your values your parents or religion tried to instill in you. This secret organization definitely doesn't exist. But if they did, they for sure would have your best interest in mind, so you wouldn't have to worry about them anyways. Anyone who says that they do exist is crazy and a conspiracy theorist. Okay, so now that we've imagined this imaginary group of people, let's say that they do not believe in the Tao, and they wish to establish their own morality on the world. They reject traditional morality, objective truth, and pretty much everything humanity has stood on throughout time. This small group of people will eventually master the art of human psychology, to the point of being able to manipulate people into thinking anything they want them to. They will convince everyone that those old-fashioned objective moral values from nature itself, or God, are a farce. They will use contraceptives and eugenics to control the population and decide who is fit to breed. They will make the world whatever they want it to be, and all based on their subjective feelings about what is good, rather than the universal Tao that came before them. Lewis does not believe this small group of humans are bad people. He actually says they aren't human at all. They have rejected their humanity and are now trying to destroy humanity altogether, and they don't even know they're doing it. This is the end result of rejecting objective value and truth. It's the abolition of man, the rejection of the Tao. Lewis ends the book with a creepy chain of sentences that describes humanity's war against nature itself. In the eyes of mankind, they are beating back and dominating nature in every way. They can conquer and tame animals. They can fly in the air with the airplane. They can conquer distance by the radio. And they even attempt to conquer the primal man himself. Mankind believes it is advancing, but in reality, nature is strategically retreating, lying in wait until mankind ultimately destroys itself. If mankind rejects the innate morality of the universe and nature and the Tao, then they will cease to be human and they will die. That is the abolition of man. Well guys, that's it. I hope you enjoyed watching, and I recommend you read the book for yourself. It's a quick read, and I have a free audiobook on my channel if you don't want to read it for yourself. I hope you enjoyed, and stick around the channel for more content like this. If you have any book recommendations, leave them below and I will consider making a video on them. Thanks for watching.